everyone. Welcome to a Double Trouble edition of ARG Presents. I'm your good pal, your bosom companion, Amigo Aaron, joined by a man who's always been double trouble for me. I give you the Brit.
Hey, we're double trouble, Aaron.
Are we?
You and I combined. Well, we're more like quad trouble.
Well, take off. What's self-burial? Thanks. Great way to start the show. So, if you joined us last week, we spun the beleaguered wheel, desperately in need of pie pieces. But we made a deal, a fresh deal. And that deal was, bam, games ported to the same system twice. Brent,
yes.
What's that all about? Ported it to the same, that's double the work, brother.
And let me tell you something. There's a lot of reasons why this happened. Either your licensings were screwed up, someone thought they had rights that they didn't, a game sucked, a publisher sucked. Everyone sucks. That's why you get two games on the same system.
There's a lot of sucking. Now, speaking of not sucking, by a sheer coincidence, a twist of fate, this is going to be a Amstrad CPC edition of ARG Presents. We both ended up picking Amstrad games. Now,
it's true.
Before we get too heavily into this, the Brent, I know I combed the internets to try to find a game that I thought was interesting, where I could dig my teeth into, something we hadn't covered, and it was not the easiest challenge to find one of these things, was it, man?
No, this is a pretty rare thing to happen, and rightfully so. Yeah. You're basically, from a consumer standpoint, it really hurts consumer trust when you release something and then release it again. Either if you're doing it for money, if you're doing it because the first one sucked, if you're doing it from a mistake, none of those things are good. All those make you look bad in the consumer's point of view. And also, it's expensive because all these had to have new SKUs, convince the stores to put this on the shelf again. Then you've got consumer confusion. When you've got two people have the same game but they're different, it makes people like, what's going on? Makes people feel cheated. So yeah, this is a pretty rare occurrence.
Yeah. It's when we started digging into this, I think it was Mitsuyama who put a link up. I hope I'm crediting it right in the Discord for a bunch of C64 titles that a forum had gotten together and talked about. Apparently, the C64 was sort of the king dong of this particular problem. They had a lot of different versions of games. A lot of what happened was you'd get a U.S. version, a European version, and just to name a few that had that happen on the C64, you had Street Fighter, and that, by the way, that game getting two ports is a tragedy because it was no good in the arcade. So that certainly they don't need two ports of that. Rampage, Afterburner. It's funny, we were just talking before the show that Afterburner actually had two ports on the Amiga as well. Pajako, I believe, pointed out. So that's kind of neat. Then you've got Space Harrier, Outrun. Outrun needed 0 ports to some systems. It was horrible. It was no good. Jackal, that was a really fun game in the arcade. I always enjoyed that one.
Absolutely.
There are multiple versions of big games like Donkey Kong. These are all in the C64. There are 2 versions of 720, the skateboarding game, and so we could have went down the C64 road easily. There was a plethora. We could have played a number of Star Wars games that got ported twice, like based on the arcade. Frogger is another one that got ported twice on several systems, which is weird. It's weird how this goes. And like you said, there are different reasons, but ultimately, at least for me, I chose the one that I could find that sort of had a funny story behind it. It was just the fact that it was made was kind of wacky, and I think yours is a pretty wacky story too.
Correct. And just to a quick correction, it was Buck Owens that provided
Buck Owens, thank you. I knew I'd botch it. I knew it. Sorry, Buck.
Now, the most famous one of these, Aaron, or at least I feel it's the most famous, was Nintendo and their Tetris, where it was the licensing disagreement. Would you say that's the most well-known, Aaron?
Well, that one's funny because that was Atari's their alias company that was responsible for that, and Atari didn't want to play ball with Nintendo in terms of the way that they did stuff, and they also thought they had rights that they apparently didn't have in court. The Tetris rights were all jacked up, if you'll recall.
Yes.
Because you were dealing with one thing I liked about Tetris. Whenever you hear about people talking about the game Tetris, is that a lot of people forget they're like, you weren't dealing with the guy that made Tetris. You were dealing with the Soviet government. They were the ones that control. So you're literally dealing with the government of a country. And so basically they like money, and they'll make you a deal. They'll make anyone a deal. They need cash. And so Tetris is, yes, I would say that probably is the most famous one. And the sad thing is the Tetris that ended up getting pulled from the shelves was way, way better than the one that ended up getting released.
Absolutely. The Nintendo one's good too.
It's okay, but it's not as good as the other one.
Correct. I agree.
So, with all that said, we're just going to dig right into it today and give it a shot. I'm going to lead the dance this week, Brent. Because this is a game I was surprised. I had to look to see if we covered it or not, and we hadn't. We hadn't covered it. I couldn't believe it ever, as far as I could tell. Now, me and Boat have covered it like just by playing games on the side, but we never formally covered it. And that game was it's the Double Dragon, Brent. Double Dragon. Now, listen. Double Dragon is a game that hit American shores like a club, like a bomb. It was a big deal over here when it came out. I figured before we get into the wackiness, let's talk about the actual game itself that came from Japan, developed by Technos. Technos, by the way, also responsible for the outstanding WWF games from back in the day. WWF Superstars, WWF WrestleFest. Two great games, among others. I think they also did Mania, if I'm not mistaken. So they were great. That's how I know. But Technos had a ton of hits. This was released in Japan April of '87, but it released pretty much simultaneously in North America and shortly thereafter in Europe. Man, this game was huge. It was the number one grossing game in Japan in '87 by a wide margin. And when they released it here in the States, it was the highest grossing arcade game for 2 years in a row, '88 and '89. So it actually, think about that. A game that came out in '87 and ended up becoming the highest grossing game all the way into '89. That shows you the kind of game it was. Now, Double Dragon, listen, I was still in high school in '88 and '89, and so I was hitting the arcades a lot back in those days when I could. And Double Dragon was a game we played, and what it did was it gave you far more freedom in that sort of game than you'd experienced in the past. This game allowed you to move all over the screen. It allowed you to pick up weapons. You were doing stuff you didn't normally do in a fighting game, like smacking around chicks, whipping people. It was sort of gritty in a way. You're going through these like dilapidated streets and stuff. It's sort of, gosh, how many games took this formula and ran with it? And it's not like Double Dragon was the first ever scrolling game beat 'em up, but it was one. It was it was absolutely one of the best. A lot of people don't realize that this game was the spiritual successor to Renegade, which is a game that I didn't like. Do you remember Renegade?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's one I never got into, but they improved it immensely when they put this out. The title for this is a sort of a tribute. Of course, you're playing. It's got 2-player simultaneous play, and the dragon thing is a Bruce Lee thing. There was basically the inspiration for this, as mentioned by the people that wrote it, was Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon, which, by the way, has nothing to do with this. But there is a feeling. It reminds me more of like something like the Big Boss or something. If you're a Bruce Lee fan, that kind of gritty street fighting sort of thing. This game, as I mentioned, was highly touted. It won EGM's monthly award for Game of the Year. EGM being Electronic Gaming Monthly. It won their 1988 Game of the Year award, which is a pretty big deal. So this thing was going to get ported to any system that it could. Now here's the funny thing about Double Dragon. Newsflash: not easy to port.
No,
this isn't like
it was pushing a lot of good graphics.
This ain't Pang or something. You're talking tons of scrolling backgrounds and tons and tons of moving parts all over the screen, and on top of that, there was conveyor belts and boxes and weapons and all this stuff that you had to contend with. There were holes in the floor. There was all kinds of stuff. But by God, listen to the lineup of the things that this got ported to, Brent. I couldn't believe some of these, and I'd forgotten some. Of course, you got the NES, the Master System. They were fairly capable systems. The Atari 2600 got a port of this. Now, I haven't played that one, I don't think, but I've got to go try that.
I don't remember that at all.
The Atari 7800, the ST port will come into play here in a minute. The Amiga, of course, the C64, which the C64 port's widely regarded as one of the worst games on the C64. The Game Boy got a port of this. You ever play the Game Boy version of this, Brent?
Yeah, I have.
How was it? Do you recall?
Oh, I don't remember.
The Genesis / Mega Drive, the Lynx got a port to this. And then eventually they even ported it to the Game Boy Advance. So this game was very, very popular. One of the wacky things about this game is its opening. It's very memorable. These two geeks. First, this chick is standing in front of this garage, and a bad guy rolls up with his crew, punches the chick in the gut. I remember being like, "Oh!" Picks her up, throws her over his shoulder, and leaves. I couldn't believe that. So right away, you've got your attention when that happens. You play Billy or Jimmy Lee. Again, there's the Lee thing. Now, it said here, I was looking on the wiki, it said these guys were known as Hammer and Spike. And the American arcade releases in the instruction manual or something, but I don't think that ever translated over into I don't think they were mentioned their names in the game being Hammer and Spike. Those names suck, by the way. And so your goal is to go through and rescue your girlfriend from the Black Warriors gang. Now the Black Warriors gang is not very nice, because if you play the sequel to this,
they beat up and kidnap the woman. So
yeah, well, in the sequel they shoot the woman, so they're even worse than that one. And the game was 4 stages: a city, slum, a factory, a forest, and then the hideout of the gang. And ultimately, one of the best parts of the game, you actually, when you finally finish the game, if you've got 2 players going, then you fight over who gets to be the boyfriend, which is truly what brothers would do. And I don't know what the situation was before that fight, but they settle it once and for all in Double Dragon to determine who the boyfriend is. So that's the arcade version of Double Dragon. Now let's talk about what was going on in the Amstrad. Okay, so the Amstrad version of this was developed. That's kind of hard to say. So the first version of this game was released. Right, it's somewhere in it's 87, 88, and I want to talk about the Amstrad in terms of your ability to find information on these releases. I had a heck of a time finding. I found a website that would tell me sort of what happened. It was in French. Okay, La Grille. The hell is that?
Exactly.
That's basically the way I looked at this thing. So this version of this game came out. This was the official version, and it came out. And like I said, as far as I could tell, it was somewhere in 88. Okay. And when it came out, it was not well received. In fact, people hated it. And one reason they hated it was this thing was slow as molasses, the Brent. It was slow as heck. So why was it like this? Well, the outfit that made it, okay, I think they were called Binary Design. The Binary Design. And by the way, they made both these versions, which I'll get to that in a minute. So what had happened is, and this is what I called from a few videos and some paperwork, okay? Binary Design was a pretty good outfit. They were purchased by Virgin, okay? The whole, that does happen. And so when they were purchased, they went from doing what they usually did, which was just make whatever game they want, to being told what to do. Okay, this is not unusual when you hear about this sort of setup. Well, apparently a lot of the people at Binary Design were like, screw you, I'm out. And so they quit. And so Binary Design, the team that worked on this, because they were assigned this by Virgin, the guys that ended up working on it were not very experienced. In fact, the phrase "fresh out of school" was used in more than one place. I don't know what school they came out of, but if your first assignment at a company is to port Double Dragon to the Amstrad,
yeah,
you are really begging for trouble. And so, but apparently this is all they could do. That they didn't have much of a choice. And so that's what they did. They ported this thing. Now let's talk about the game itself. And we both had a go at this thing. The first thing that's going to strike you is it's very slow, as I mentioned. And there's a reason for that, because for everything I saw, and I went and tried this out too, just to double check. This was basically a colorized port of the ZX Spectrum version of this game. By the way, this on the ZX Spectrum also a challenge. Okay, that's gutsy to even try to pull that trick off. The frame rate on this, I mean, how would you describe the frame rate on this?
It's several.
I mean, it was low end, to say the least. And so everything you did was literally the frame rate can't be more than like 5. I mean, it's real slow. Now, the funny thing about this game is that if you take the frame rate out, okay, it doesn't have all the bells and whistles that the arcade has, but it's not the worst.
Oh no, it looks good.
It looks colorful.
Looks fine.
Yeah, it looks colorful. The fact that they colorized this, I mean, I thought it actually was not too bad. In fact, in a couple ways, there are a few, one or two minor ways where I think it's got an edge, but it's still horrible. So the fact that you've got your both your players, the whole 9 yards. But I mean, it is crap. Oh, by the way, there's not that many weapons. I think there's 2 you could pick up, as I recall, But I mean, otherwise, it's the same game as you would expect. So if you played the ZX Spectrum version, you wouldn't be surprised. So Virgin, when they saw this, they were like, "What the hell is this? This is horrible." They didn't like it, as you can imagine. And I'm sure the frame rate was a big part of it. And I guess some people complain about the coloring, but I mean, like I said, I didn't have a problem with that.
No, I think that visually, I mean, strictly from a graphics perspective, the game looks fine.
Right.
I mean, the characters don't look arcade perfect. I mean, come on, that's not gonna happen.
Right.
But they look like people, and if the frame rate was, let's say, if the frame rate was 10 frames a second, right?
Right.
You would have a playable game. But it's literally like 3 frames a second. And because of that, it becomes an unplayable mess.
Did you actually get anywhere in this?
I mean, I played it long enough to know what was going on. Yeah. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I know. Listen, I understand. Say no more. So, anyway, they weren't happy about this, and ultimately, they basically they hired a guy to try again. Okay, and so he tried again.
The old redo.
Yeah, and because I should mention this got panned in magazines and the like. I've got some reviews here. They weren't positive. And it's funny, all the reviews I found were for the very first version. Computer and Video Games gave it a 52. Retro Archives Modern, which is the modern one, gave it a 42. These are out of 100, by the way. Moby, their fans gave it a 3.6 out of 5, and I'm going to get into this in a minute. CPC Power Good gave it a 15.87 out of 20. This was the French site I went to. Now, I
think all those scores are incredibly generous.
Yeah. Let me explain.
Because the game, unfortunately, is unplayable.
Well, I'm going to explain why this stuff. There's a lot of confusion with this game, okay? And so a lot of these scores, like, there are plenty of places on the web that don't have these as 2 different games, okay? They don't know. It's not like everyone knows this. A lot of people, they're putting these databases and stuff together like, okay, Double Dragon, bang, bang. So you never know what you're going to get. There's one key way to determine which one you're looking at, which I'll explain here in a minute. So a lot of these scores and stuff, you kind of throw them out. I wouldn't put a lot of credence in these scores because that you don't necessarily know which one they played. Okay, and the funny thing is, the one that they would have played doesn't necessarily. I mean, there are good points and bad points about them both. And we just also mentioned this game has sound, but no music at all. Okay, so there's that. So it was time for attempt number 2, and attempt number 2 was a little bit different. They went a different route with attempt 2. So what you've got here is what you've got with the second one was they took. First of all, it was done by Richard Applin, who's got a real good rep. Okay, so enough said. What they did was they took the arcade game, and this, keep in mind, Binary Design did a lot of these ports, the home computer ports. Okay, so they probably had this stuff lying around. They took the arcade graphics and they digitized them down to the Atari ST. Okay, step 1. Step 2. Then they took those downgraded graphics and they downgraded them some more to the Amstrad. Yep. And so what you've got in this version is you're basically looking at like the 3rd generation arcade graphics that are dithered down for the Amstrad. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means that it looks weird, like the color's not off, or the color's off. It doesn't quite look like it should. Now, is this an improvement video? I mean, do you think this is an improvement from a visual perspective, Brent? Taking the frame rate out of it?
No.
Yeah.
No, if you're talking just the sprites and the environments and stuff like that, no, I do not see this as an improvement.
I would agree with you. The other one was very colorful. I know something else about the other one is that the 2 different brothers, they actually they have different colors. Like if you play 2 players on this one, they both look identical. So they truly are identical twins. This one, on the other hand, is better in certainly gameplay-wise. This still ain't a speed demon by any stretch of the imagination. But it runs probably, I would say, at least twice as fast as the other one, wouldn't you say? Maybe even more?
I would say it's even a little more than that. This version is a lot more faithful to the arcade.
Right. Absolutely. Also, I noticed in this version, I watch a lot of wrestling, Brent. They have this thing called Money in the Bank, where you have to climb a ladder to get a briefcase to win. And these wrestlers are painfully slow getting up these ladders. And that trend was continued in this version, because when you come to a ladder in this game, and I will say it carries over to the bad guys too, the slowness of going up these ladders, it's laughably slow.
It is.
So
it is.
I did laugh my butt off at that. This thing runs better. It also has music that plays the whole time. This game has music, simultaneous music and sound effects, which is good. This version has more weapons. It's definitely more faithful. But the colors in this, children, everything has kind of a yellowish hue to it, and it's just from the dithering that as it came down. From undigitized or taking these digitized graphics and downgrading them to the system. You played this one as well for a while, Brett. How did you think this thing played? And give me the one you thought was the best or points in between. What did you think?
Well, I played this one significantly more.
Yeah.
Because it was playable. I beat several levels, and it goes off a credit system, so you get 3 lives, and then you have 3 credits. I didn't go through all my credits, but I definitely went long enough to, I believe I got to mission 3. Yeah, I got to mission 3, which was enough to show me that this was a vast improvement.
Yeah.
A vast improvement over the other one in terms of playability. And at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Yeah.
Now, am I going to make either of these my go-to Double Dragon experience? No.
No.
But it shows that they cared enough, or or more realistically, they thought there was enough profit in Double Dragon, seeing how popular as it was, to give this another go. And it was good of them to do that, because the first one was completely unplayable.
Yeah. So here's the funny thing about this. So when they remade this version, I know for certain, just from what I've read, that this one, which is funny because I found this on a French site, this was absolutely released as Double Dragon in France. So if you were in France, for example, and you'd never seen that first version, this is the version you got. You were like, okay, yeah. Well, people in the UK would hear about the rave reviews Double Dragon was getting for the Amstrad. They're like, what the heck's going on? And so they found out, hey, wait a minute, there's another version. And so it was hoped that if this would eventually get released over in other places as a budget title. And sure enough, when it was time for the old budget tape, which that's why I've got the budget tape up here. This is what ties both these versions together. It was time to release the budget tape of this, and they released it. But guess what? When they released it, they used the first version. So, so this particular version of Double Dragon for the Amstrad was not well distributed outside of certain areas. Now, we go into the land of speculation here, okay, when it comes to this. I could not tell if this particular version was ever formally released anywhere, but like the only place I know for certain it was released was France. I think it was also released in Spain, okay? But I don't know for sure if it was formally released in the UK or not. But Richard Appleton pretty much did all this. He had one guy helping with the music, I think it was, and that was it. So this was like his baby, and he did a real good job on this, given the parameters what he had to work with. I would like to take some of the color from the first one and put it in this, and I can see I'm assuming because of the way this stuff was dithered, he just couldn't do anything more than what he did with the color, and so that's what you ended up with.
Well, he like you said, he copied the graphics from the arcade to the Atari to the Atari to the Amstrad. I think if this was a full budget first time release, they could have tweaked these colors because there's so much yellow. It's just painful. And I know the Amstrad's color palette is a little yellow heavy, but this is extreme.
Yeah.
So I still props because the game went from an unplayable, 3 frame per second mess that looked pretty to something that didn't look nearly as nice, but was an actual game.
Right.
And I bet the reason why this got the old one got the re-release is it looks better on a tape packet.
Well,
looks better as box art.
I know it's something I noticed, by the way. These tape packets. If you look in the back of the box of these places, they're using the arcade graphics.
There you go.
Good move. Now, I want to say before I close up shop here that I found, again, you can take all this with a grain of salt. This was not easy. I found, like I said, I found a couple sites that documented what happened. There's a video from a guy called Larry Bundy Jr. on YouTube. He did a couple videos on games that got ported twice, which I like this guy's stuff. He's super famous and popular, and he did some stuff. Guru Larry, that's right. And I know where I could tell where he got his information because I ended up at the same spot he did to get it. So he went with it like it was fact, like bank. But I can't confirm some of this stuff. But that's just the best I could do. But I know where he got it because I went to the same spot. So, but it is a wacky thing to happen where a company is so ashamed of the first go around that they try again. But I think that they were just that was sort of a bad spot, and I'm sure this tarnished their sterling reputation. Nevertheless, we did get some reviews of this brand, if you can believe it. Some people endured. Let me zoom over here and we'll read through them here. So, first out of the gate, we've got, let me see here. One moment. Scroll. Okay, here we go. Pajako 6502. So, Double Dragon, the Animagic version, which is the not-so-good version. Slow and painful to play, and the colors burned out my retinas. I do not think that if this version had ran... I do think that if this version had ran at a decent frame rate, it might not have been half bad. Whilst the graphics are loud... You can at least see your characters on the screen easier. That's true. 4 out of 10. Burial. The Richard Appleton version, or the better version, whilst this version plays better than the other version, it's still quite sluggish. And the thing that bugged me with this one was that trying to see the character sprites on the screen was difficult and possibly could have been even worse on CRT. That's a good point. I wondered how this would look on a CRT. I thought it might look better, but I'm not 100% sure. This version does seem to have more enemies on the screen than the Animagic version, but it isn't the slugfest that the arcade version is. 6 out of 10. And he also quotes the Amstrad CPC deserved and could have supported a better port of Double Dragon. I think he's probably right there. I think that's all we've got for Double Dragon, Brent. An interesting look at a wacky game. I shan't be playing this one again if I'm honest. I was not a big fan. What did you bring to the table, my friend?
Well, I, as we've already discussed, also dove into the Amstrad library and pulled out Paperboy. Paperboy, for those not in the know, is a game where you play as a paperboy. You drive down an isometric street, delivering papers to your subscribers and vandalizing those who are not, breaking their windows, knocking over their trash, messing up bird baths, throwing papers at people, all the whole good fun things that you do when you're a paperboy and you want to get shot on the street. So the arcade version of this, Aaron, absolute classic.
Yeah.
Came out in the beginning of 1985. One of its big claim to fame is the controller was a modified Star Wars yoke that was handlebars from a bicycle.
Did you ever play one of these in the arcade? So you had your handlebars.
I'm sorry?
Did you ever play one of these in the arcade?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I couldn't remember.
Tons of times. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even I was a youngin', but I still played it. The handlebars, the way they worked is you're always moving forward. There's no point you can actually stop. But you can slow down and speed up by pushing forward or pulling back on the handlebars. And then there were 2 buttons on the handlebars, one on the left side or on the right side, both used to throw your paper. And you deliver these by your subscribers would have mailboxes, and you try to throw it in their mailbox. But if you couldn't pull that off, you could just throw it onto their porch, hit their door, be on their doorstep. That was considered a delivered paper. The game was tremendously fun and incredibly popular. This was the highest selling port for a video game in December of 85. It was also one of the highest selling games over in Japan of the same year. So it was something that really made the rounds. And when you've got a popular arcade game, you know what that means. It's port time. And this thing was ported to the nines. Absolutely everything got a port of this. There's no reason to read down the list, because if you're thinking of a system, yes, it got a port. And when it came to the Amstrad, it got 2 ports. Sort of. So let's turn over to the Amstrad version of this. So it comes out in 85, huge hit. Everyone's scrambling to get rights, and they're scrambling to get the games out the door. Because, arcade games, especially in this time frame, were in and out. You had to take advantage of the time you had. So all of the ports go out in 86, except for the Amstrad. And the reason why that is the first port to the Amstrad was as is often the case, ripped from the ZX Spectrum. And it was a really ugly, bad translation. And the people over at Elite that were publishing the game saw it and were like, no, we cannot put this out. We think we're going to sell a lot of these on the Amstrad. Let's get a good version out here. Let's do it right. So they called up, I got to find his name here for a second. Dead air. That's good. Mark Haig Hutchinson. And they said, listen, you've got to save us. The port we got for Paperboy, it's screwed up. We can't sell it. We got to do something better. So Mark said, I'm on it. And he was like, how long do we got? Well, like I said, you got to get these games in and out, only valuable for a short amount of time. They said, you got 6 months. And he was like, what? He's like, that's impossible. I can't do it. He was like, no, do it. You got to do it. Make it happen. So he teamed up with Paul Walker for the graphics. And he said, Paul, handle the graphics part of this game. I'll do all the coding. We'll put it out. It's going to be awesome. Now, Paul and Mark didn't work in the same office. In fact, they were both freelance employees, which meant they not only were they not in the same office, they weren't in the same city. They were 100 miles apart. So while one was working on the graphics, the other one was working on the code, and they would talk on the phone about what each of them needed. And that is how the updated version was released. So he's got a here. He says 64K games were the norm back in the days of Paperboy. So I had to fit it in that space. Paperboy is one of my favorites. It was released a year late because I didn't start coding until 6 months after the other version came out. Apparently, the guys who made the Spectrum version tried to make a CPC version, and it was a mess. I started from scratch, set up my own box, and wrote the game in 6 months altogether. I was lucky Paul Walker, another freelance worker, did the graphics for me. He lived 100 miles from my house, so he did a lot of stuff with the phone and did a really good job. I finished the game the very morning of my deadline. And he talks about he worked, a lot of long nights, and said he was very proud of the code that he did for the game. And I'll have to say, the game runs smoothly. And I have no problem with that aspect of the game. I think the coding is pretty solid. He goes on to say, I thought my version was the closest to the arcade. It was hard work, but it paid off in the end. I had some royalty money. However, I'm sure Elite, who is the publisher of the game, made a lot of money with it. And no doubt if it had been released the same times as the other versions, would have been very successful. Elite offered him a job as a senior program because of this game, and he accepted it and worked there for quite a while. So Mark had a lot invested into this. Time-wise, not a lot of time, but, a lot of man-hours put in. And so you get a pretty good port of Paperboy to the CPC. So why are there two versions? Well, Elite is looking for people, they're distributing these games throughout, but they didn't have a big pull in Spain. So MCM Software said, hey, Elite, listen, we want to get Paperboy into the Spanish market. Why don't you let us do Paperboy for the Amstrad? And they were like, you know what? Awesome. We've got this version. It looks great. Let's get it out there to market. They sent them the wrong version of the game. Now, MCM had no idea about this. They just said, okay, I guess this is what we're releasing, and put it out on store shelves. And when Elite saw it, they were like, what the crap? But it was too late at that point. So that is why this one is the MCM version. You can't find it. It was a short-term thing. But that's why it's referred to as the Spanish version, is because that's where it was released. Aaron, I know you took a look at both of these. What did you think overall?
It's funny, the Brent. These games are totally different looking, but they are they're both. It's funny, the Spanish version, as you've called it. Let's talk about that one first, because I played it first. It looks like you're playing Paperboy at 3 Mile Island, or like somewhere that had been nuked, like Chernobyl. I mean, the color scheme is just the worst. Worst. But I found this game to play pretty well. To be honest with you, I thought it played an okay game of Paperboy, if you want the truth. It also had it had sound. It even had music at a couple points. When you get to the obstacle course, the music kicks in. So listen, would I have released this in its current state? not if I didn't have to. But if you could have fixed the colors on this thing, I mean, they had to have been able to do something with the colors. And we just saw Double Dragon. They'd colorize the Spectre version. So if this is a direct Spectre port, we know it can be done. Okay.
Yes.
Otherwise, I thought this played pretty well. I mean, if I'm being completely honest. So but yeah, let's look at the other version. Now, the other version of this game is it's an awesome looking game. I mean, they did a great job. I mean, this is one of the better looking Amstrad games I've played. And this shows you that the Amstrad could put out some darn good graphics. I mean, this doesn't look that far off the arcade. It looks nice.
Well, I'm
just saying,
crazy, but it looks really good.
I'm saying for a home version, it doesn't look that. They've got the arcade feel of the houses and stuff right, and that's nice. You don't have as much room to play footage as you do in the arcade, but it's okay. Now, this one is absolutely slower than the other one, the Spanish one. The frame rate. The frame rate's
a little bit.
The frame rate's slower. Don't give me that. This one, you could also. I learned this little cheat. You can just get on the little. You can get on the little berm there between the sidewalk and the road, and just drive all the way to the end without. I mean, I ran out of paper eventually, but that was the only reason I had to leave the thing. So you can sort of cheat, which is never put a cheat like that in the game. Never good. And someone should have saw that. This one has like no noise. So I guess they're
zero sound.
They never got around to putting any sound in this, and which is
there is a reason for that, Aaron. Like I said, they had to fit it to 64K, and he did not have time to tweak the code. And the graphics, were coming down from 100 miles away, so they didn't have enough time to reduce the programming parts of it to go below 64K. Thus, they had no room to put sound in it.
But basically, he was hampered by a timetable he had, which is because you could tell the guy that did this was both the guys, they were no hacks. These were world class programmers here. I can see why this guy got offered a big job. And this, if you take out the fact that there's no sound, and you take out the fact that it's slow, and this isn't Double Dragon, the bad Double Dragon slow, but it's somewhere in the ballpark. It's not fast, that's for darn sure. If you take that stuff out of it, then what you got here is a real pretty game. The big question, which one plays better? Because, yes, this one's definitely better looking. The other one sounds better. Which one plays better? Really, the Spectrum-y ported Spanish version probably plays a little bit better than this one. It's close. I think. Here we go.
I spent a lot of time with these games. More than I should have. I will tell you that right now. I have a very soft spot in my heart for Paperboy, because it gives me that light gun shootout thing, where you stand, you're on the boardwalk and you shoot the little light gun, and when you hit the target, something happens, an animation triggers, or something pops, or it falls over. Those type of games, Aaron. That is what I like. That is one of the reasons why I like Paperboy so much. You get to throw your paper and see how it interacts with the environment, how it will hit a trash can and knock it over, or you hit the guy and you break up the fight, or you hit the little jerk on the big wheel and his wheel breaks.
I like that stuff.
Really enjoy that aspect of the game. I'm going to say the Spanish version and the global version to differentiate the two. The global version has none of that. Zero. They have no animations when you hit anything. All it does is pop up a score. Okay?
And it's hard to hit that stuff too.
The Spanish version has some animations. It has knocked over trash cans. It has bird baths. You can hit it and knock the water out of the bird bath. You can cripple the child. You can do a lot. There's
Don't
a
say
lot
it like
of interactions. That. No, cripple the child. There's a lot of animations. Now they're just frame differences. It's not some colossal difference, but you do get rewarded for doing these things. Here's another thing, and I didn't even realize this, Aaron, until I played this. When you break windows on one of your runs, when you start the second day, some of those windows will be boarded up. That's from the arcade version. The global version does not do that. The Spanish version does it.
Okay. Good eye.
It does it, Aaron. Right. That's a very
I didn't even notice that.
Sharp detail. Yeah. Thing number 2, the global version, when you start the game, everyone on the street is subscribed to your paper. That is not how the arcade game goes. The arcade game has about half the street is subscribed, and every time you make a full loop and deliver all your papers successfully, you'll gain subscribers. The global version does not do that. You have all the subscribers right up front, and then if you don't deliver a paper to them, you lose a subscriber. But you can't gain any because you already have them all. The Spanish version has it like the arcade. Start with some subscribers, and then as you deliver papers, you can get more of them. The global version does not have any visual differences between houses that are subscribers and aren't subscribers. So in the arcade, a subscriber will be a yellow house or a prettier house, a nicer looking house, and non-subscribers will have usually darker houses with a darker roof, and that is how you know who to deliver a paper to. Or if they have a mailbox, that guarantees that they're a subscriber. Global version does not do that. The houses never change. It's only a scrolling isometric background. You never get subscribers or not subscribers. The Spanish version does change. It's hard to tell. It took me a long time to figure it out. It's mostly changes to the roof, but there are these differences between the two. And if you can run the footage of the side-by-side, I would appreciate that. Another thing that is different, the total difficulty of the game. As you discussed, you can completely cheat the global version. The Spanish version, very fair. It's a very fair game. Yes, the frame rate's not as good. The screen is even smaller. But it plays a true arcade version of the game. And I appreciate that so much that I 100% without a doubt feel it's the superior version of the game. And I will fight anyone who thinks otherwise.
You know, I'm going to give you some credit here to Brent, which I don't often do. Due to your, usual, you don't do a great job, but this time you've killed it, and I'll explain why. These are great details that a lot of people would not have stumbled upon, if I'm honest, and that's good. That's a good eye. I did notice a few of those things. I didn't notice the windows, that's for sure. But I did notice that the you couldn't affect the stuff that was, the actual items that you could throw at the arcade, knocking people over and knocking trash cans down and whatnot. I think we could both agree that the Spanish version it certainly plays better. I mean, in terms of it's got a better frame. It's got a better frame rate. And
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think really the frame rate is probably better on the global release, personal opinion. But obviously, let's break it down to categories. Global release, there's no doubt the graphics are better in the global release. Yes. Sound quality. Spanish. Well, the global release has zero sound, so the Spanish version wins by default. Another thing, in the arcade, your Paperboy talks as he's delivering papers.
I love that.
He says little quips, right? Nowhere is that in the global version. Now, the Spanish version doesn't have audio talking, but it does have little quips at the top of the screen anytime he does something remarkably amazing or he dies. So at least they have the quips in there. So graphics, global. Sound, Spanish. Gameplay, Spanish all the way. Faithfulness to the arcade, Spanish version all the way. It kills me that people did not get to play this on the Amstrad, and it also kills me that they did not give the Mark enough time to program this, because you can tell he has a love for Paperboy and the way he talks about it. He could have tweaked this to have been the best version out there, and he didn't have enough time. I don't blame him, but holy cow, it ticked me off so much, Aaron, that I got passionate about it. And it just drives me crazy that just because it was graphically inferior, it didn't get its just day out there and make a difference.
There you go. Well, we did have a review of this, the Brent. Pajako 6502 came back with a review of Paperboy. He first talks about the no sound version. At first, I thought I was looking at some handheld port, e.g. from the Atari Lynx. All the game action is crammed into a tiny play area, and whilst it does run at a decent frame rate, lack of space makes the game a little tricky in places. That's true. But also makes the game too easy because the mailboxes are always very close by. That's also true. This version also seems to be lacking a lot of the obstacles of the original. And I couldn't really see any black houses to smash windows and generally mess up. This version feels unfinished, even without the sound. 5 out of 10. And then he goes on to speak about the other version. He calls this. He says the other version. Sorry, CPC owners. This one is just another quick and dirty port from the Specky version, with some eye-melting colors thrown in to try and hide the fact. However, this one actually, in my opinion, plays better and is closer to the arcade than the other one. Okay, so it isn't graphically as nice as the other version, but it does have a lot more content and is quite playable. I reckon if someone could hack this and change up the colors, it could be rescued. Still not the best Paperboy on an 8-bit, but not terrible either. And heck, it ain't even the train wreck the BBC Micro version I got stuck with as a kid was. 7 out of 10. So there you go, Brent.
But Jocko, that's right, buddy. Cookie for you. Cookie for you.
Listen, I mean, hey, the proof's in the pudding. Now, all that said, here's the $1 million question to Brent before we move out of here.
Absolutely.
You're an executive at Elite, all right? You lay eyes on this radiated Paperboy version or this beautiful color version. Despite the shortcomings, which one do you put on the box and which one do you put in the box?
Oh, you shipped the color.
You got that right, brother.
Because especially in the 80s, and really it's true all the way up until, say, 2010, where everything started to blur together, graphics are king. It's unfortunate, but that's the fact of the matter.
I agree with you. You know what else is king, the Brent?
Me?
Ah! No, it's the wheel.
Oh.
Let's get to it. Now, it was requested that we read off what's on the wheel right now so everyone will know. So we'll do that real quick. We've got the ComX35, new 16-bit games, games that became other games, C64 flight sims, chat choice, fight, Acorn Electron, which is our retro rewind piece this week, CPS1 Arcade, Sinclair QL, which is our new piece this week, and lastly, chat subject choice. So there are 2 chat choices on here, various kinds. So be ready, people in the chat. We're going to fire this thing up. Are you ready, the Brent?
Absolutely.
All right, let me put the wheel in position here. And here we go. And the winner is CPS1 Arcade, Brent. CPS1.
Absolutely fantastic.
Now, Brent, what can you tell us in your knowledge of the CPS1 arcade machines?
One of the greatest board sets architecture of all time.
Yeah, it's a good one.
So many classic games. I cannot wait to dig into
so
this.
we're going to just pick. We could pick any of the CPS1 games that we haven't previously covered. That's the plan, right?
Absolutely.
Very good. Hey, just a couple quick announcements here before we take this thing to the house. First of all, I'd like to say last night, as we're recording this was last night, September 18th, we had International Computer Club, Brent. You may have heard of it. And it was a lot of fun. We had a real good turnout, man, and had a good time doing it. So I'd like to thank everyone that turned out to have a little fun. We had a lot of presenters there at the Brent, and we ran. It was a slim, trim, tight, like 3 hours and 33 minutes, I believe, is what we ended up going on that. It might have been a little bit longer, but it was pretty long. But everyone seemed to have a good time, and some people got some good sleep, depending on who you are as you watch the show. But we had a good time. So thanks everybody for coming out. Heck, we might do another one of these days. You never know with the old ICC. It comes in like this. So, we also, listen, this is early, real early in the game. But we're going to, since I was telling Britt that I didn't have anything upcoming for a long time, but we do have something upcoming. I believe it'll end up being the 26th of November. Will be BAM. It'll be Thanks for Giving Marathon with myself and the Brent. So that's a long ways off, but we're giving you plenty of time to get yourself set up. What's wrong, Brent? You think it's too early to build the Thanks for Giving Marathon here in September?
Well, I think something we should build that's a little closer to home. Next week, the live version of ARG Presents will be a special Friday edition.
Yeah, we probably should talk about that now that you mention it. We're doing a double trouble, just like today. If you tune in, we'll start Amigos about, I'd say, between 5:30 and 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time when Brent gets off work. No, we'll start between 6 Okay,
and
there you go. 6, 6:30. Brent will be taking the big chair next week. Boat will be out of town. And me and the Brent are going to be covering one of our favorites, the Brent, a game we physically owned. We're going to be covering Primal Rage on the Amiga. Primal Rage. I should get the Chud, the guest star on that episode. That's his game. And then after we finished recording Amigos, we're going to do ARG same night, same time, soon as Amigos. And we're going to flip right into ARG, and we're going to do these CPS1 games, which should be a lot of fun. So if you could join us this coming Friday. Again, let me get the date on that, the Brent. That'll be Friday, the 24th of September, Brent. It'll all go down. That will be back here on Twitch. It'll be great. Good times. And then hopefully boat will be done and get back pretty quick after that.
The YouTube version will go up Sunday as normal.
That's right. So, again, that's me and the Brent covering Amigos and ARG Presents. Hey, with the boss is away, we can go crazy. Get ready for a Primal Rage skit. Nah, you're not going to happen. Anything else, Brent, if we take this thing to the house?
No.
There you go. Enough said. Have a good week, everybody. We'll see you guys Friday. Adios.
Thanks for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed the show. We want to say a special thank you to Duncan Styles for our vector style graphic and Bart Pitt for our amazing music. We also want to say a super special thank you to our supporters. Rolo, Olive Hub, Terry Howard, Gary Heather, John Schaller, The Slow Norris, Frodo and L, Chris Foles, Mitsuyama, Jason Warnes, Rob Black O'Hara, Andy Craig, Andy Jones, Kevin Bean, Jocko6502, Anthony Jarvis, Steve Rasmussen, Bernhardt Lucas, Dave Velociraptor, Graham W. Vetke, Roshi, Mr. B, David Terrence, Super Tech Boy, Oram, Sundown, Texas Foosballer, Airshot, Retroalgy, John Deckman, Jerry Dennington, and Z9K9. Would you like to become a supporter for as little as $1 a month? You can do so at patreon.com/ARG Presents. Supporters get access to our Discord channel and their name called out in the credits. Don't want to explain another credit card bill? That's okay too. You can support us by leaving us a positive review on Spotify or Apple iTunes. Have an idea for a wheel piece? Email us at argpresents@mail.com. We film live every Sunday on Twitch, Sunday, 10 a.m. Hope to see you there.